It's great to have Bri Watson on the show today. They've been doing PhD work in history, archiving, knowledge management, library science. And I think I saw somewhere that you had something like 15,000 Zotero references, like some crazy number. And your fascinating research that you're doing with a lot of folders, which we'll get into when you share your screen, and a really impressive note graph. An academic who is definitely putting Obsidian through its paces, which is so cool. And I can't wait to dig into your system. So welcome to the program, Bri.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm really delighted to be on the show. I've been watching it since the beginning.
Awesome. So before we dive into your use of Obsidian, particularly in academia, I know you also have played around with Notion and Dendron and probably a few other systems. So tell us about your journey to Obsidian. How did you get to the note-taking knowledge management paradigm that you have today? And I know also that you're kind of working on a strategy for re-architecture as well as all of that, but give us a little history of how you ended up with Obsidian and where you are with your whole note philosophy today.
How does one recount like almost 10 years in grad school? But I just started a history program after I graduated undergrad because I thought I would be a history professor. That was always been my goal. But as you may or may not know, there are no jobs in history right now. So after finished my history master's, and through that whole program, I really just didn't use Zotero, didn't really use any software. I took notes by hand for the most part, and did just some general use Microsoft Word and stuff like that. I took about half a year in Europe to do my research for my first book, which is about the history of erotica and sexuality and how people got these censored books over borders. And then I got back and I was on Conan O'Brien, which was a very, very strange interview. If you want to watch that,
I saw that, and it was really, I thought you did great. It was.
Oh, that's good.
Really cool.
I've not been able to watch the video for the life of me.
Yeah, I saw the post that you put in Discord on that, but yeah, it was great. I mean,
yeah, well, that's good.
Larry King was a little awkward, but yeah.
Yeah, I saw he just passed away too, which is I woke up the morning that happened, and 8 or 9 texts of his obituary. I was like, okay, I didn't know him that well. The TV was at once. Right. And so then I got to library science, and after putting in, I don't know how many, 300, 400 references to my books by hand, I was like, okay, I need a system for managing it. So I'm going to
Wow. So you did that first book all by hand.
Yes.
All of the bits. Okay.
Yeah, it was a mess. It took way longer than it should have, honestly.
Okay.
And then I library science, and there's much more interest in information technology. I mean, it is literally information studies, so much more interest there in that. So Zotero is like my first really dipping my toe into the water with everything. And then I started going, I think just kind of playing around with Markdown editors because I really came of age on the internet, I guess, on Reddit. So I was familiar with Markdown. So I used the software Zettlr for a while, and that worked pretty well. And it wasn't really until, I would say, the past year or so, and that's probably when everything started to take off, when I was accepted into a PhD program at the University of British Columbia. And I knew I'd be studying knowledge organization. I knew how to get my shit in order, so to speak.
Right.
So trying to get that, and I started just going through every program I could find on the alternative to .NET, and so I ended up eventually. I use Dendron and I still use Obsidian. So those two are probably the pair that I really use.
Cool. I'd love to see your use of both of those and what you use what for, and the other. And I think one of the cool things about Obsidian, and I'm sure you'll talk about this, is the whole idea of, since the files are local, you can really use any editor to read or write in the files. And so, it's quite powerful that way.
My Dendron installation's broken right now, so
okay, we won't see that. All right. Quick question before we jump in. So you mentioned Zettlr. So are you do you subscribe to kind of a Zettelkasten methodology? Do you use atomic notes? Are you of that philosophy, or will we see when we kind of dig in here?
That's a good question. I think I started that way, and I've been slowly, and maybe this is something I could show you too. But I maintain an Airtable of just everything I've read or anything of interest of personal knowledge base, articles, software, anything like that. I maintain all of that so people can. So most of it I can read and review it, but like mostly going through all that, I think I just realized that the Zettelkasten method worked very well for what it was, but it didn't really work for me. And as we'll talk about with folders, really, I really need the context around different things to realize why it's important, and that really helps drive a lot of the ways I think about note taking in general.
Cool. And how did you hear about Obsidian? How did you find out about it?
That is a great question. I honestly do not know. I might have been on one of the random discords for Dendron or LogSec or a couple of the other ones, and I think I honestly at first rejected Obsidian from like my going through stuff, but not because it seemed like a nice piece of software, but it was library of information science is very heavily in favor of open source information. And it took me a while of like, well, I'll play around with it some more. And I think really the community is what kept me coming back to Obsidian. The Discord community is really active, and it's got a really great community around it. And that's really where the founders have done a stellar job. I mean, obviously with the software as well, but the Silver especially has done a fantastic job with maintaining the community and building community.
I totally agree. It's what drew me in the year. Actually, I came to Obsidian probably at the end of 2019 or early 2020, but then it didn't really do much with it. And I was also looking at Rome research, and was in that or the Slack group for that, and then actually built my own, not for commercial use, and built my own knowledge management system for my own usage. And then came back to Obsidian to sort of see where it was. And not only was I blown away by this, the progress they had made, but the community is really what just kind of sucked me in. And you're right, Silver's done a great job. But even all the people who are in, it's very warm. And I never felt like, oh, this is a stupid question, I don't want to ask this and look like an idiot. I never felt that sense of hesitation or reservation around reaching out to the community for help. And it's unusual because, there are plenty of online communities that are filled with intelligent, driven people, but it doesn't feel so welcome. You sort of feel like you got to be on your A game when you're asking a question or writing a response, or you're going to get, chewed apart. And the community is really, it's wonderful that way. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. And I think they've done a fantastic job. So I'm excited to see how it grows too. And I think to some extent, Rome is also leaning more heavily into the community. But for Rome, it was easy for me because it was both paid and not open source. So that ruled that one out real fast. And
not local. Not local,
that was the big one. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a pain. So, you have to you can extract everything out of it, but you have to, export all of your files. And then, it's not, and I'm not putting down Rome because I think Rome is superb piece of software for what it does. And for people that it works for, it's terrific. But for those of us who really like local files and working in Markdown and the Obsidian community, the developers and the roadmap, it's hard to pass up. All right, cool. So can you share and kind of take us in and maybe start with your folder structure? Because I know I've seen some screenshots in the Discord server of your folders as well as your note graph, and your note graph is just insane. How impressive that looks.
I guess there's two ways we could do this. We could approach it from like how I start with like an academic article and annotate and carry all the way through, or we could start with the folders and kind of poking around and stuff like that.
I'd love to go through both. So whatever you feel, would be a good place to start. Wherever you want to jump in is great, because I think there's interest in seeing both of those, both your architecture as well as how do you process from, as an academic, as an academician, whatever the word is. Okay. As a PhD student and someone who has done a fair bit of work in this space, showcasing how you go about taking notes and consuming content is definitely of interest. Also, your architecture that you have of your folders, how you come up with it, and what works for you. And I know you're also thinking of an architecture change that is on your mind. And so would love to hear kind of that as well. So wherever you want to start.
I guess let's start with talking about like an article. So let me just pick a random article here. And I'll just start with Zotero because really that's honestly where my story started.
Yeah.
So I'll be looking up here because I have a screen up here. So, All right. So Zotero, big blank, and it's kind of a basic. You can see I have 3,000 items, not 15,000. But I mean, if you 3 times 3 is 9,000 because each one has 3 nodes. So still pushing it. But Zotero is a pretty basic piece of software, and really, if you're not familiar with it, it's used for managing bibliographic reference.
Yep.
And you can already start to see some of the ways that I organize my files up here. But basically, like the files, different libraries are part of the actual articles, and then as you click into item, this shows metadata, and that could be like tags. This one has no tags. It could be like notes that I've taken. So when I get an article, very often it filters its way. A little thing pop out. There we go. It filters its way into one of these big categories I have over here. And you can kind of see like the meta is kind of like, here's some things that are higher priority reads. I need to figure sorting this one out. These ones need fixing. There's something wrong with the date or the metadata on it. But that's kind of like just like the way of thinking of the whole system. And then each of these are kind of my main research areas. So PKB is personal knowledge management. Prolegomena and propaedeutics are fancy words for introductions or encyclopedias or ways of thinking about the world. 200 is my classes. So my classes here at UBC. And 300 is my project. So anything I'm working on currently. And I'll just open these up, actually. It's probably easier to see. So you can see encyclopedias, Crypt is like disability theory, capitalism, Marx, excellent lit reviews and important papers. These are kind of things I'm thinking of for future work. I probably definitely need this citation for my PhD dissertation.
I'm curious how capitalism and Marxism play into library science. That's
a lot. Yeah. A lot. I mean, we could have a couple hours on that alone for sure. I mean, so much of libraries started right at the turn of this 1800, 1850 industrial revolution coming around. And Marx, too, is trying to think through industrial capitalism. And the workers in libraries, very often women who could read and write, but who were never allowed to be in positions of authority. And of course, just the way of thinking about the world as human and material and animal, like the different ways of looking at the world. So yeah, Marx has a lot to do with library science for sure. And then classes and some projects I'm working on, which I'm going to leave that one hidden. Sorry. I know you might want to peek a peek, but KO is knowledge organization, and that is my research. Knowledge organization, it kind of refers to how you organize things, how a library organizes something, how a website organizes something. I'm sure you've been at a grocery store and you've used a crappy register self-checkout software, and you're like, why is it broken like this? Or airplane websites, like why can't I just need the ticket? Just give me the ticket. And that really, when you start learning about knowledge organization, you start realizing everything around you is so broken, and it kind of ruins your life in some ways because you're like, oh, now I understand.
You can never see it the same.
Yeah, exactly. And GLAMs, that refers to galleries, libraries, archives, museums, and special collections. So those are what I'm interested in. I'm interested in knowledge organization in GLAMs. So how libraries and archives, museums use and organize art, books, poetry, you name it. And then
let's take a quick quick tangent, if we could, just for 1 second.
Yeah.
Where did the passion and the interest in this space come from? I love the topic. Is this something that's always been of interest to you? The kind of knowledge fragmentation, knowledge organization, the structure of information, how we consume it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. In my first book, like I said, was really concerned with like, why is an erotic book or considered pornography, but if you go to a museum and there's a naked woman on the wall, that's art. So it's really concerned with like the nuances between like what makes one or the other. And I don't know, if you asked me this a few years ago, I might not have said, but like thinking through how queer folks especially have to find a specific term for themselves, or in my case, I'm disabled, I'm deaf, and the term very often used is people with disabilities, but disabled people very much prefer disabled people, or CRIP for short for crippled. It's kind of like a way of like reclaiming that word. And then there are other ways, like thinking about like whether or not somebody's polyamorous, or demisexual, or allosexual, or asexual, like those kind of categories of how people live their lives, I guess, have always interested me. And as a historian, like you run into like, oh, I just need to find the perfect term to find all the sources I need. And that sometimes accurate. And then sometimes as I started to like really get into this, I realized that I was so interested in both the history of the systems and how they could be used. Because with history, my complaint was that like I felt like my work wasn't going to affect the lives of practitioners, people who would use it every day and think about it every day, and who needed to be practical and useful right now, not like 10 years from now. So that's really the key of when I got into knowledge organization, especially partially because it's not super glamorous, I guess, in glams. A lot of people focus on front-facing stuff, whereas knowledge organizations tend to be like behind the scenes, and like even though in some ways, if you control the metadata, you control the world. So there's going to be another aspect of that.
No, that's really cool. I appreciate you going into that. And it gives you a unique sense when you're evaluating software platforms. Like I'm thinking of Notion, for instance, of with its underlying database behind the note-taking stuff, and other platforms like Obsidian, that you have a take that is much deeper than just the feature set, but how the actual structure of the organization, which is cool. So all the more reason that been looking forward to having you showcase your work here and see how you do what you do.
Yeah, and I mean, probably my complaint with this Notion is that it's a great note-taking thing, but it's not enough of a note-taking thing, and it's not enough of a database either. So I use Obsidian and Airtable are really my two, because I need really complex features. Yeah. Like people know not, that's fine. So yeah, I think I've given you a good sense of how it all breaks down, and if you're interested about any category, just give a holler. But yeah, let's pick a topic here. To document the undocumentable, I will do a new share to this PDF over here, which is on this screen. I have lots of screens, but you can probably see the PDF here, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. This is kind of a standard library science work, thinking about like this one's about physical anthropology and biology. So classification of race and gender and sexuality. I will read this, and I'm grateful for my past self for doing this, but my past self decided that like, okay, I'm going to make the highlights all mean something. Okay. So when I go and highlight something, each color will mean something different. Okay. And I have no idea why I started doing this, but I'm really glad I did, and I'll show you why in a second. But so the colors here really will be the ones I use are the standard colors, because those are the ones that Zotero can extract from a PDF, and that becomes key to the whole workflow. Okay. So yellow will be like an important point made by the author, just like you use like yellow highlighter. Something that's red would maybe I would say, I don't know, the human species dependent on race, trying to prove the existence of human species dependent on race. If my thesis focused a little bit more on race versus gender or sexuality, it might be good to have that. So I will highlight that as red Red means important to me, like it's something I would be able to use in some way in the future. The next category would be purple. That would be lit review. So something to do with if you're reading something, you're like, oh, okay, that's an interesting citation. I want to follow up on that one in the future. I'm going to need to come to that. So I'll highlight that, and that will give me like a to-do list to follow up. And then the other colors are green is like if I disagree with somebody, which come to think of it, green, most people assume go, but I'm kind of being like discuss, kind of like that's my association. And blue would be if I've come back to a PDF and I'm rereading it. So I need to know, like, I can use the different shades of blue. So light blue, dark blue, to like my various trips back to the PDF to like, there's a lot of blue in it. It's probably really important to me.
And how about when you finish processing it, do you leave the highlights in? How do you know you're done?
I know I'm never really ever done with any of the PDFs, and that's why I use Zotero so heavily and why I use Obsidian so heavily. But so when I've read through the article, when I'm like, I've gotten what I can from this, maybe I probably won't need this. This gets way more into biology than I really need, but I got that classification equals race, and that's a citation I could probably use, right? Mm-hmm. Close out of it, and let's take us back to Zotero. So it's now here, and I use the Zettlr file to extract the annotations, Zot file, sorry. And this it's just a simple thing that goes through and it reads it. You can see all the highlights are in here already. That's great. This is actually recent, the fact that it can pick up magenta. It used to only be able to pick up yellow, red, green, blue. So I'm excited to learn this by accident that it's now picking up shades. So maybe I can think even more creatively about how to annotate. So it's done. I will use another extension here, which is by somebody in the Obsidian forum, Argentum. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, but Argentum is his username, and he created a plugin that exports everything to Markdown. And now you can kind of see where this is kind of going. I think this is the right command. I have like a slightly outdated version, so you can see the different versions, but I think this is the one I want. We'll find out. Zotero notes. Yes, I think that works. And you can see it has made a Markdown file here. So if I want to view this file, I think I'll need to share, and we'll go to Obsidian now, actually. But I'm going to show the file first. So you can now see Obsidian and my two file organizers. Here it is. It's sitting here. It's right. I'm going to double click it. It opens up in another Markdown editor that I use when I'm not in Obsidian. And this is the title, the site key, and the topics I've put it in. And in fact, this would probably more likely be under knowledge organization, and actually it'd probably be under natural, applied, and social sciences, medicine. And then I'd probably have it under an anthropology folder. So these topics, which are clickable links in Obsidian, would be my Zotero file. So you can kind of see I've already made pages, thinking about making pages. It also makes pages of the author. It makes pages of the date, which I don't know if I really need that. And if I had filled out the metadata all the way, it would also have pages, links to the publication, which is the journal of documentation, and it would have links to a book, if it was like in a book chapter. And yeah, it pulls the abstract out. That's great. And then it has my annotations. And as you know, probably, but clicking on these links right here in Obsidian will bring me right back to that PDF, which is a killer feature, honestly.
Yeah, it is pretty nice.
Yeah. So does that whole flow kind of make sense?
It does. Now, once it's in Obsidian, okay, and I presume it comes into a default location in Obsidian, where do you put it? Where do you move it once it's, so you take it from Zotero notes.
Yep. And it stays in Zotero.
Actually. You leave it there. Got it. So you work with the link, you leave everything there. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
And this is because I'm thinking for future, because I know there are ways in the MD Notes extension to allow it to make multiple versions of Markdown files, but I don't want that. That's too many Markdown files for me to manage. Yep. But I know I will go back and revisit it, and I know that I will probably add more notes, because one of the things I didn't really show that I can also do is I can also make a note like this and do like anthropology, and that will become a clickable link in Obsidian.
Oh, that's cool.
So like it will pull off anything that's like a sticky note like that or a highlight. And then as I close out of it, close all the tabs here, I'm going to click out of it because I don't want to be looking at it just in case it breaks something. That's just System Today note, which is empty. I've never tried to have the file open that I'm also like trying to edit from a different program.
I do. And every now and again, I do run into a problem. I do most of my editing in Obsidian, but sometimes I pop into Typora now, which I don't know if Typora is only Mac only. I'm not sure, but it's a Markdown editor that has some nice WYSIWYG features built in that I know are going to soon be part of Obsidian, but using tables, for instance, in Obsidian is a little challenging right now. Whereas usage of that in Typora is a little bit easier.
I think I actually have run into a problem because I had it open at the same time.
Yeah.
But let's see.
So another question related to the note now. How do you track your state? Like, that what needs to be done next with this note, with this, and you have those links. How do you know I need to go there to pull this together? Walk us through if you were actually processing this, where your mind would go and how you'd chunk that up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized when I was doing wrong, I was forgetting to re-extract the annotations.
Okay. All right.
So extract annotations. There we go. That makes sense. Actually, like this Zotero note repository is just a repository. It does not really get touched. Again, so let me just...
You just use it as a launching off point for really your highlighted notes.
Yep. And here we go. The anthropology note should now actually be in here. So here it is.
Yep.
So now you can already see it. And I'll maybe it's jumping ahead a little bit, but I will show a little graph so you can see it. I like the dark view a little bit better probably.
Yep.
But you can see all the mentions here. Anthropology, I have some other links to anthropology. And okay, it looks like I haven't, and this is somehow how I will find out that I haven't visited a note and then I need to go back and relook at it. So this one, it looks like this was about anthropology and anthropologists, but I haven't looked at why or how. And here's a very offensive and outdated term, primitive societies, and that's pulling from the Library of Congress subject heading, which is something we can touch on a little bit later. And here's my history, 1800 and 1900 category, which if I click on this one, you can see that just starts getting bigger.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because these are all my history books. And there we go. So we're already starting to grow out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And these things kind of help me think through like, okay, well, one are these things in the middle. Okay, so it looks like there are some authors here that are publishing in two different fields for me. So that's probably important to look closer at their work, especially if I've cited that author a few times. In this case, I know Cohen Flash Sporting Press is a great book about New York newspapers at the turn of the 1900s and like how they were kind of like run by a bunch of young men. Like they kind of like created this culture of like flash hot cars and men being dandies in the street. But that's aside from the point. So yeah, just to go right back to.
But that's a great point that you bring up though, using the graph to find sort of those surprise kind of, not just, well, what is this connected to, but, ooh, what does this connect to that I didn't think that appears that I didn't expect to see a connection for, and using that as part of what can I do with that? What does that tell me? Where does that, spark my interest?
And this is why a lot of people who come to the Discord for the first time don't really know what the point of the graph is. And
right.
This is one of the reasons I wanted to do this video, because it does kind of show you, and I've made discoveries this way when I'm like, I look at Caswell. So Michelle Caswell is an archival literature scholar. She's published a lot of articles that I've looked at. But as I click into her work and start looking at the graph here, I start to notice some other people that I have cited from a lot, including, I don't know if it's going to show up in this particular, oh gosh, too much information now. And that's the problem with having so many notes.
Right.
But in this case, I'm not sure what one I clicked on to get there, but I was like, oh, well, it's interesting. Caswell in this one article is citing this concept called webcham. Here it is. It's webcham. And webcham is kind of it's a shorthand for referring to white, European, bourgeoisie, cisgender, heterosexual, English-speaking, Anglo-American males, as a way of like referring to like, okay, well, these people who are in power in all the ways have convinced everybody else that they're the minority. But really, when you flip it around, it's really them who are the minority. But I noticed that she had cited somebody named Hope Olson in that concept. And why? Here we are into the graph. And I noticed it because they both published in a same journal like years and years ago. And my assumption here is like, I probably asked Michelle, she's probably open to it. But my assumption is like she had read it because it was an article in the same issue of the journals that she had published in. So it probably sat around in her memory and she remembered it. And that's not a earth-shattering discovery, but it is indicative that like these publications might have a way of shaping people's academic lives
for sure.
The future.
That's fascinating. That's a really, really cool theory or concept that is really interesting.
And you can see here, one of the other things that I've done with my knowledge organization system is I have things called a research PKB. So a research PKB is things like these scholars. So the American Archivist is a publication, so it should actually be in the publication pages. But the way I'm thinking about this is that these are kind of like Wikipedia pages where I can see all the references I have made. So here I'm looking at the American Archivist. This is an analysis of the publish, and these are the notes I've taken on the publication American Archivist. Cool. They like to publish stuff from archives and special collections. They publish in library information science and history and their scholarly. And now I can know, hey, I have an idea for an article. Maybe I should poke around and figure out where I should publish it. Or
that's cool.
Here's me. Here's all the things I published. Yeah. So like that's helpful for me to like realize that like, oh, these are these important scholars that now I can like go and look at them and I can take notes on them and like why their work is important to me and why things I might critique or I can expand upon. So that's kind of like me thinking through. I'm kind of creating my own personal Wikipedia.
Yep. Yeah, but I would say even more than Wikipedia, because it's not just the links, but it's almost the why of the links as well. One of the challenges with Wikipedia is it's just the information, but so you get a great taxonomy, but it's difficult to do anything with it. Really turning that into useful, actionable types of things that you can do.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd love another quick tangent while we're on that. As a knowledge management scholar and someone who's spent a lot of time researching this, what are your thoughts on the quality of Wikipedia's content for referencing and for citation?
That it's interesting because I don't think very often of Wikipedia. One of the fields I work in is linked data. I don't know how familiar you are with this, and this is kind of like a way outside the realm of what we're talking about. But linked data is like this concept of it's the next version of the internet, really. It's the way, instead of linking to a page, you are now linking to the data itself. You're linking to the thing people actually want. And the best way to think about it is like when you at somebody on Twitter or YouTube or something, you're saying like, I am adding this other person. Because the computer reading your text will not know. So, for example, Anthony Gold is having an interview with Bri Watson, and then a computer will not understand who any of these people are, what YouTube is. But if you link the data, it's a way for the computer to now understand that, oh, the Mona Lisa is a painting, and it goes with all these other paintings, and it was painted in Italy, and now it goes in this area of the world. So Wikipedia has a separate spin-off project called Wikidata, and that's what I'm more interested in, because that is
interesting,
kind of the cutting edge of where the internet will be going. And also the subject headings that I've talked about elsewhere and here they are linked data very often. Like Library of Congress subject headings are all linked data, so you can search through them. Yeah, we can touch on that a little bit if you want.
It's cool. Yeah, I am fascinated by architecture, and not just computer architecture, but architectures of how and why, human archetypes as another. But we can go, as you said, way off into that. And we should stay focused on Obsidian, but those are great topics to dive into.
Although I would recommend you take a look into some books about data infrastructures if you're interested in that. Data infrastructures being the term for how data is organized and how it affects how people's lives are lived sometimes.
Well, think about it. I mean, just look here in the US over the last 6 months or even 4 years of how data has influenced people's lives in a substantial way. Political data, epidemiological data, and the source of the data, the truthiness of the data, carries significant impact and weight.
Yeah. I was laughing at your choice of time periods because 6 months and 4 years definitely have no impact whatsoever.
Yeah, none. All right. So yeah, we're looking at your model of the sun here.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, if I do the whole, how do you do the holograph? Is this it? Oof. Here it is, the whole.
Yeah, the whole universe.
Yep. It doesn't really look like much of anything right now. Sometimes you'll and something happened in the Discord, people will like kind of be like, oh, it looks like a I guess maybe a heart if you look at it this way. No, not really. Yeah, I got nothing. A bomb? A mushroom? A mushroom. That works. All right. Anyways.
Some from the Hubble telescope.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, okay, walk us through then. So you're using a folder structure. You touched up in the beginning of, you had played around with Zettelkasten and looking at, kind of using links to define everything, but really coming to a folder structure. And tell us a little bit about, and especially coming from your library science expertise, kind of the way you do taxonomy of your folders and some of the why behind it.
Sure. We saw a bit like this in Zotero, and I'll just bring that back here. But in this Zotero is probably my most comprehensive. And one of the things I should probably say up front is like, and this is maybe something I should emphasize in my post on the forum a little bit, is that like people should use the systems that work best for this. This is personal knowledge management. This is the very first time you can do whatever you want, make it a perfect system for you. And
that's an excellent. Before you go on, that's an excellent point that you make. It's not a Bri knowledge management system. It's not an Anthony knowledge management system. It's a personal knowledge management system. It needs to work for you, and we all work in our own way. We all have things that work for, and it may evolve over time. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. Now, having said that, though, I am fascinated and intrigued by how academics who study, especially coming out of knowledge management, who study this space, sort of the conclusions they come to and the why. So having said that, I would love to hear why this works for you.
For me, the last thought I had really on that was that, like, sometimes when people read these, they look at these systems, they're like, oh, it is authoritative, or like, I am going to use the entire Library of Congress classification system. I'm like, unless you've been doing this for 90 years, you do not have millions of books that you need to classify, or millions of articles that you need to classify. Some people might, I don't know, maybe when we're in our twilight of our lives and we have like Obsidian version 90, we'll be there. But I think people will sometimes take things as the law, or they'll like be rejected, like totally like, no, that's wrong because I do it the best way. There is no best way for this. There is maybe a better way to organize a library than some other ones, and that's where we can argue about. I'm always happy to have a conversation about that. But yeah, so Zotero is the most organized, and part of the reasons for that is because I want those little subject headings to carry into my notes at the end.
Yep.
So I'm kind of thinking ahead there. And then I also use this file organizer called Directory Opus for Windows, and it's a paid software, and it's probably the only piece of paid software I use for the most part that I've really saved up for. But it's, I think, like $70 and $70 American dollars. But it lets you customize everything to an extreme line. And you can see here I have all the folders colored a certain way, and that is because colors also are something I carry across all of my system. Zotero does not have colors, which is frustrating, but my email folders, for example, are labeled with these colors. My Google Calendar is labeled with these colors. This means that, like, so for somebody like me with ADHD, when you're trying to switch from one context to another, knowing that, okay, I'm thinking about class, so I need to look for the class color and not think about all the other things on my calendar, it helps me. And here's the PKB. That's what we're looking at here in Obsidian.
Yep.
And I had these other folders previous, kind of like personal information and stuff like that. Class in UBC is class in UBC, and it's everything that's not marked down, basically. It's echoed here with this 20 folder here.
Yep.
Projects and research also echoed here. So you see how it lines up pretty well. And then once you hit 500, it doesn't quite go there. 400 service, and that's work I do that's not paid, but maybe aligns my research, but it's nonprofit work essentially. But in Obsidian, it goes on to be society. And then once I get into actual Obsidian, my notes become probably, I'm still working on finding the best thing for it, but it is still pretty organized. So I used something called Johnny Decimal, which is this principle you've been seeing with like using 3 digits and 2 digits and 1 digit. And that's an easy way of like sorting a file so they appear in a certain order no matter what, and for helping you to think about how you want to structure everything. So everything's chronological here. And to limit you to 10 subcategories at your lowest level of the tree. Exactly. Everything's chronological. So I know that everything, these are all the classes that take in order. And personal would be like where I'll keep my daily notes. So these are also chronological by reverse order. And self-tracking, and then society, philosophy, and religion. That's kind of just certain various things that don't really follow anything right now. That do need to be sorted out. So every top level folder is another inbox. So I have my main inbox where like all my new notes are created, and then I sort them out every week. And then every top level folder, like this one right here, I know the Canada notes thing is probably notes on like how health insurance works in Canada, because I've moved here as an immigrant. So how to get my green card. Lala is religionist. It's a poet that I really like, and I happen to have a lot of notes on her work, so that's in there. And then stuff about English teas, which did you know that bands in English tea like the red banded tea and gold banded tea, it refers to like what color the milk turns afterwards. I didn't either. And now I did. So I was like, this is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I have a note on that. Did not
It's cool. So you use Obsidian for everything. You put everything in here, which is, kind of, if you're going to have a knowledge management system, you really want to consume everything in there.
Yeah, and for sure. And I don't use tags.
I was just going to ask that. So
I was going to switch here. In this, you can see all these yellow notes. These are all tags that I've from a older software that I used to use called Journey, which is an Android diary app. Basically, I kept all my daily notes in that for a long time, for like 5 years. I finally figured out how to export it and then get it into document form, then get into text, then get into Markdown. So it's finally into my Obsidian, but now I need to like actually go and edit some tags and remove stuff and organize it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the new plugin just came out that will help you do that. Help delete all new tags or add tags, which is awesome.
Cool. All right. This is really, tell us so what plugins are you using? I see the calendar plugin.
I think I have quite a few. And sometimes I will just install them and then not use them. I have 32 right now. So advanced tables.
Which ones do you rely on though?
The calendar one.
Yeah.
The checklist is so it looks for those purple or magenta Zotero tags. Mm-hmm. And it appears, and that's like my list of books to buy. Citations, obviously, that I can pull from my Zotero library and cite from it. CSS snippets, kind of like tweaking to make things look pretty. Control tab. Folder note is actually something I need to spend some time working on, but like I'm going to define what each folder means. Yep. So like it's even more clear for me going forward. Icons, I really like emojis. They're just like communicate so much information and they're useful. And I think Brian Jenks talked about this in this video too. So that is something I'm going to explore a lot more. And then these are all not used right now, but they're things I'm thinking about using.
Mm-hmm.
Obsidian Git, which backs everything up to GitHub, so it's all versioned. Recent files.
I'm a big fan of Anki, by the way.
Yes,
or let me say a big fan of space repetition.
Yeah.
Which, I use Anki. I hate the user interface, but it is what it is. But
it's the best one out there, honestly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I use Anki for quite a lot. I don't use it for Obsidian. Actually, I do want to figure out how to do it, but it's more time to put in than I have right now. But I want to make it so like I can just kind of have an ongoing review of all the papers I have read, and that's the Zotero file. And there seems to be a way to do it, but it seems to be like I need to reformat some stuff, and that might throw everything else off in the workflow. So
right. Or you could just keep on clicking random note for hours on end.
Yeah.
All right. So I also see that you are a big hotkey user, because I see you doing things like changing color schemes and pulling things up very, very quick, much faster than I do. So clearly you spend time tweaking your keys to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And honestly, that ties in with Anki perfectly. I can pull up Anki. I have just a one that's just shortcuts for the computer. So
wow, you do 100 a day?
No, not really. Like some of these like have a lot of overlap.
Okay.
I would say so. I have two different ones. One's like the one I actually have on my phone.
Okay.
And that one, I'd say I probably do about 100 a day, but like a significant portion of that is I'm learning all of the word roots in Latin and Greek, and it's like I don't know, it's like a 8,000 item deck. So that one's like easy to fly through.
Okay.
And these ones are like my shortcuts for Word and Excel VS Code.
That is a great use for Anki.
Yeah, actually it is, because I learn things like the case of an entire word so fast, or can select a box of text. Yeah, I've learned so much just from, and it speeds it up. And then I also do my own shortcuts in here. I don't know if I use Vivaldi, Zotero, Obsidian, preview mode, Alt-E.
Yep.
Got to actually open a note, I guess. There we go. So kind of shows the preview mode. Most of the time I work in light mode. I'm not a dark mode person so much.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah, and so these are, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And this is just something, the notes I took last night. We were using a software called NVivo, which is a qualitative analysis software. So I took notes on the workshop.
Very, very cool. So you had mentioned, you and I chatted a little bit offline, and you had mentioned that you're thinking of re-architecting, or you have a strategy for kind of re-architecting what you're doing in Obsidian. What are your thoughts? What's leading, what's driving that? And what are your high level thoughts around that?
Yeah, a little sneak here. You can kind of see how I have stuff organized in cool. Airtable, and I have Airtable ported into Obsidian.
So for people who don't know, although I suspect most people do, but for don't, you can embed an iframe into a note just by an embed code. So yep.
And this is my landing page. Like when I open Obsidian, this is when it opens up to. It's got reminders, some PowerScript notes. So if I want to convert docs, and one of the things I've been thinking about here, and the reason I opened this page was, do it like this, right? How my main thing works. Brian Jenks actually helped me out with this.
Yeah, he's
here we go.
Really.
So here's his workflow for how he does
he consumes his content. Yeah.
And one of the things I've been thinking about is because both because it's where Mermaid, because I'm in grad school right now. We have a kind of a presentation series coming up called Threads, in which people can just kind of talk through some ideas that they're thinking about. I was like, well, one thing I'm thinking about is this idea of a mind palace, which if you're not familiar with it, it's this idea that humans are really good at remembering places we've been and spaces we've been in. So we will remember our childhood home in intense detail, where a closet was. And people use this to do these incredible feats of memorization, such as memorizing an entire deck of cards, one order they appeared in, exactly the same. And I was like, well, what if I kind of put knowledge organization into a memory palace? And I have no idea if this is going to work at all. But I thought maybe it could. I could do the entrance to my childhood house, my front home, the stairs, my master bedroom, my brother's bedroom, that's Tyler, my bedroom, my desk, my bookshelf, the dry sink, there's a computer room. So what if I put all my recipes in my kitchen, in my mind palace, then I would know I go to the kitchen folder. Or what if I don't know, maybe I would think brother, friends, society, maybe that's where all my notes on friends or stuff goes. Whereas my bedroom would be my desk would be academic work. My bookshelf would be the Zotero notes. So yeah, I'm kind of thinking through.
I like that. The only question I have is, and I'm a big fan of memory palaces as well. I was struck by it when I read a book many years ago called Moonwalking with Einstein.
Yeah, me too.
That really, really moved me. The question I have, and I haven't tested this out, was, so I filled my house with, if you remember the book, I filled my house with the cottage cheese and the peat smoked salmon and and of course I can remember all of them because I walked through the house. But the question is, what if I want to reuse those rooms? How does that work? How do memory experts reuse rooms with a new deck of cards? If you had the ace of spades in, whatever, how do you reuse that? How do you reuse the room when you want to, change stuff?
Consciously delete it from your memory. Yeah. And that's something I don't even know how to do, because these strategies actually take a lot of time. What I would probably think of if I was maybe I have all my projects in, I don't know, my closet. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the project on queer things in the closet, coming out of the closet. But I would maybe think, okay, well, one of my pandemic things was really getting into these smart lights. I don't know if you can actually see it because the sunlight, but have all the smart light that change the backgrounds of the room. So maybe I can think okay, project A is under light green, and think light green.
Yep.
And that could be a separate folder here. And I have no idea if this will work, but I'm just going to
I like it. I can't wait to see where and how that goes. And just
we can have another episode and talk about it.
For sure. Totally unrelated to Obsidian, but related to this. And speaking of pandemic things, so for fun, I wanted to see if I could remember all 118 elements of the periodic table, and using a memory palace like technique to do it, and it worked. And of course I stuck in Anki, and so now it's there forever. And so yeah, I can literally, you could give me any element and I could walk from there to the end or there back to the beginning, through
the that. One I really know a lot about is boron, because I had to report on it in I don't know, third grade. I just remember it was element number 5, I think. And that's
pretty good.
Yeah. And the electrons that made it up and what it's used in. And that's it. It's a pretty boring, boring element.
And I have no need for this whatsoever, other than it can impress people in a party, of which I don't go to anybody. So I can impress myself that
we are dreaming of the future parties, right?
Yeah, that's right. But anytime I hear an element anywhere, my mind goes right to the next one and the previous one. And but all that to say that I do think the way that we chunk information, the way that we store it is fascinating. And especially, if you look at grandmaster chess players, their chunk sizes get to be huge. And and so anyway, that's something I find really fascinating. And I if you go back to your Airtable thing, I'd love to see. So, kind of like that structure of, I think it's cool what you're embarking on, and I can't wait to see how it plays out with that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Really, who knows, it's an experiment. But I think that's hopefully that's something that people can get from this video, or just from just talking on Discord in general, and that you should feel free to experiment with this. And one of the things I tell people that they might find helpful is to use the Library of Congress subject headings if that's what's useful to you. So if we do want boron.
Interesting. Yep.
And these are free. These are librarians have spent almost 100, 120, 150 years now thinking through how to organize information. So maybe it helps you to go, okay, cool, broader terms. Yep. So you go up in the hierarchy, group 13 elements, non-metals. Narrower terms, irrigation water boron content, soil water boron content. That's what makes sense in the Library of Congress system. It's not I might not have put boron as narrower, content is narrower, but to use those structures to help you get thinking about that. And also to think critically about them, because things like the Dewey Decimal System, which is one of the things Nick Milo used in the LYT kit originally, that we talked about a lot, and I helped him get out of the Dewey Decimal System. The Dewey Decimal System was founded by, even for his time, a very racist man, who gave, for example, he gave an entire class, so 0 to 100 of class, I don't want to say, so everything from 300 to 399 Christianity. All the other world religions were on 401 to 402.
Yep.
And that's the most egregious example. And there are some really bad ones once you start digging into all of these systems. But think critically about your own system and how you can make it better.
It's interesting too, this idea that you just brought up, which is thinking broader and thinking narrower, that back to the Zettelkasten idea, or any note that you have, thinking about what broader concept could this tie into, or should this tie into, and what narrower concepts could this link to? Because one of the things that Obsidian does so well is linking and being able to use those links to extend your knowledge. And what great way to extend your knowledge, but thinking about broader concepts, narrower concepts, and lateral concepts. What like the idea of those two authors that you would never have connected together, that you got that lateral leap there with that.
In library science, it's called NT, narrow term, BT, broader term. Okay. And then RT for related term. Yeah. And then UF is when you have a alias to replace something.
I love it. The one other thing that I try to do with several of my notes as well, And what you brought up earlier, this idea of criticality, of looking at it critically, essentially, what don't I know about this? What don't I agree with on this?
Yeah.
And really kind of challenging ourselves of coming from a scientific background, really, how can I disprove this? Not how can I find more evidence to support this, which, of course, is part of what you do when you're building a case for something. But I think equally as powerful is, how can I disprove this? How can I find disconfirming evidence for this? And it just leads into areas that are just fascinating, at least for me.
Exactly. I always start from the premise that you might be wrong, just right. By premise of growing up in the society you grew up in.
That's right.
It might have blinded you to some things. So it's a point I make with my students a lot, is that we often talk about people being at intersections of things, and that's limiting. If you're a Black woman who's queer, that's a lot of ways that you have been pushed aside, marginalized, minoritized, pushed down. But those intersections can be generating, because they give you a different approach and a different way of thinking critically than the rest of the world has. So you are limited, and that's not to undermine any of that at all. But you can use those limitations in empowering ways, hopefully, as long as you do have the authority, the ability to.
Yeah, and it also gets into the idea of privilege and this concept that you don't really appreciate it or understand it if you're in it. Right. And it's those blinders that, so many of us have, that we don't realize that, why doesn't of course, everything's going to think the way that I do and look the way I do and have the same philosophy and mindset that I do. And anyone who doesn't is clearly wrong. And, starting from that is already, you're going to get nowhere with that. So you want to stop sharing? This has been so cool. So Bri, thank you for sharing all this, giving us a deep dive into how you use Obsidian and Zotero and all the other stuff that you're doing. But your research is fascinating. And obviously you are, as we said at the beginning, you're putting Obsidian through its paces. You're doing a lot with it. And I also appreciate not just how, you clearly are a power user, but I also appreciate your contributions to the community, because you're in there, you answer a lot of questions, you're actively involved. So, you talked at the beginning that one of the things that drew you in is the community. And now here you are contributing to the community, making it, even stronger, doing what it's doing. So thank you for sharing. And even more importantly, thank you for the way you touch lives and the impact that you're having. I appreciate it.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.